Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Sunday, July 12th, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central, in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. And I've got to say, on a wonderful Sunday like this, obviously it's Rules Retrospective Day. And today we're going to look at some rules. Look at the old rules. What's going on with that? There we go. And to click a couple of buttons here and double check a few things. Looks like we're in order. Anyway, I think part of what we've decided is to check out Encumbrance, which we all know. Oop, let's move that up there. See how that looks. There we go. Take a look at this early book here. Right? So I am talking about encumbrance, so we'll take a page 15, huh? And see. Those are gold piece values. Weight which can be carried. Weight of a man, 1750. So what do we got there? 1750. Not a range, just a flat out, this is the weight of a man. 1,750 gold pieces worth of weight. Now, why do we need to know that up front? I think there was the idea that we were carrying the bodies of our fallen comrades out of the dungeon. I can only assume we need the flat-out weight of a human being based on that. Now, why there wouldn't be a conversion there, how many gold pieces are in a pound, right? So, it goes on, though. Load of gold pieces equal to light foot movement, 750, 1,000 per heavy. 1,500 armored foot movement. You know, I'm not sure I understand what that means. Maybe I did back once in the day. I would think this would be light, medium, and heavy. Armored foot movement. Isn't heavy foot implying there's armored? I'll have to come back to that. If somebody's in the chat and they know, feel free to chime in with the answer. Leather, armor, or saddle, okay. Weigh about the same. Chain type armor, 500. Plate mail or horse armor. Helmet, shield. We've had some recent discussions in a number of places about helmets and whether everyone should wear them if they can. And of course there was the thinking that the old rules would say, you know, if you're not wearing a helmet once every 1 in 6 times that somebody, or is it 2 in 6 times that somebody swings at you, if you're armored but you're not wearing a helmet, they're going to aim for your head. Now that's not necessarily true with someone who's not armored, because why bother? You're still hitting the same lower armor class. But the idea that serious head injuries would be happening to the vein and those who were making sure their hair didn't get crushed. You don't have a bad hair day when you're down in the dungeon. Polearms, halberd, pike, two-handed sword, each 150. Morningstar flail, battle axe, 100. Sword, mace, hand axe, bow and arrows, each 50. Dagger, 20. Miscellaneous equipment, and this is meant to be a pile of stuff. rope, spikes, bags, etc., etc. So, they put spikes in there, which are probably one of the heavier things. If you got 12 iron spikes, that's like having a brick of metal in your backpack. It's like carrying around a chunk of part of your weight set. I mean, rope can get heavy. 50 feet of rope can get pretty heavy. And, if we can use the word, it's encumbering. Because it's large and it's awkward, and unless you wrap it up right, you can have loops flopping around, getting in the way when you're trying to draw a sword, and all of that other stuff. So encumbrance, we have to keep in mind, has never been just about weight. Maximum load per person at half normal speed, 3,000. So this is all original D&D stuff. Example of employing encumbrance: a character himself with the following: plate armor, helmet, shield, flail, bow, quiver, and 20 arrows, dagger, miscellaneous equipment. Add up that list to 1,200. The character would move at the speed of an armored footman, 6 inches per turn. There's our answer from before. He could pick up an additional 300 gold pieces of weight of treasure and incur no movement penalty. He would stay at 6 inches. Weight over 1,500 would incur the penalty of half speed, noted above. That would be 3, although equipment could be discarded in order to avoid this penalty. Drop some of the miscellaneous equipment. Negotiate with your referee. If I got rid of the iron spikes, can I hang on to the sacks? Because I'm going to need the sacks to carry the gold that I'm adding to my weight limit. Weight and equivalents. Here you go. 1 coin, copper, silver, or gold, is 1 unit. Not 1 pound, not 1 gold piece, 1 unit. Because we've got to remember, gold and silver and copper don't all weigh the same thing, right? But their encumbrance, because of their size and shape and not just their weight, the difference in weight between 2 different coins, kind of negligible until you get up into the thousands and tens of thousands. So you can kind of hand wave that. But what you can't hand wave is the fact that it takes up a certain amount of size, of space. And if you've got 10 of them, it's the difference between carrying a handful of change and a roll of quarters, right? There's a significant difference, not just in weight, but also in size, and the fact that you can roll up, there's something. Scroll cases just large enough for an average size coin so that you could drop in coins like you're rolling quarters or pennies or dimes or whatever in modern day coin rolling clubs that exist because I said so. They don't. But that's something, right? It's not a scroll case. It's a gold piece case. How many would it hold? 100? We'd have to figure that out. How thin would a coin have to be for 100 to fit into an average scroll case? Hey, here's a neat thing, by the way. And I'll have to look up who it was I got this from. I know I picked it up through Amazon just because it was kind of cool. And I thought it might make a decent prize at like GaryCon. And I picked it up prior to GaryCon, right? It's this nifty little scroll casey thing. Let's see. There we are. Right? It's got a little symbol on it. It looks kind of like a 20-sided die, right? With a flame coming out the bottom of it. It's got these snaps. And it rolls out into a dice rolling surface, right? So you lay it out on the table, And then it also has this on the one side. In the what gets in the center of it is this zipper case. So you can put dice inside. Only of a certain size, though. My 30-sider's not going to fit in here. My jumbo dice are going to have trouble fitting in there. But these are good for regular sets of dice. And certainly good for Lake Geneva Games dice. Anyway. 7. Nice. So this was kind of cool. I just saw this thing. It's leather. It's pretty nice. It's well crafted. Those things roll up and then snap to close the case. Alright? And you've got this nice interior surface to roll dice on, and then you've got this zipper tube all the way inside that is for holding dice. So I'm going to do a quick check here and see if I can find this thing. Forged Dice Company. Scroll dice tray, rolling mat with a zippered dice holder. I picked it up on Amazon. It says it's $20 now. I'm not sure if I paid that much. Probably. It's worth $20. I mean, it's a nice piece of leather working, right? It comes in black. Dark blue is what I got. At the time, I don't think black was available because I would have grabbed black probably. That's just my foible. Comes in a nice kind of a light leathery brown. It's all leathery, right? There's a gray, a lighter gray, and a sort of a forest green. There's a purple, or more like a violet. There's a blood red, and there is a white version. So there are 8 different color combinations. And, it's meant to look like a scroll case. It's a dice rolling surface, so if you play at a friend's house and they have a nice dining room table and you use metal dice, you don't want to scar up their table, this is a good solution. I mean, I love dice trays. I've got a couple of them. I love dice rollers when they have the little tray. When stuff just drops out to the bottom, it works. It randomizes the dice, but you're not protecting the surface, and I think that's part of the whole idea behind. For me, it's part of the whole idea for using a dice roller, tray, surface, whatever in the first place. That's one of the upsides. So it's got the cool snaps and the stitchings. It's about 10 inches. And when it rolls out, it's about 10 inches by 13 inches plus the straps. So pretty neat. Forged Dice Company. Scroll dice tray, it's called. That's pretty nifty. Anyway, I guess that was sort of like doing a commercial there, wasn't it? Hey, LexFire22. Just popping over to see the chat again. Good to see you, buddy. All reviews are 5-star. Oh, were you looking at it too? Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty well made too. I like it quite a bit. I generally use jumbo dice, so I may have tossed my money away by purchasing it. Not because it isn't a cool thing, but just because I don't know how much use I'll be getting out of it personally. But it's pretty neat. I like it. So maybe I'll use it for smaller cons. Yeah, there's a good idea. Absolutely. Yeah. Summer cons. So you don't want to carry as much stuff from your room. Keep it in a bag with just the oops, I'm losing the top of my head here. Oop, no, now we're getting ceiling. There we go. Not too bad. keep it in a kind of a, what do they call those, go bags for when I'm playing with a player's handbook. What was I talking about yesterday? I went down to a half-price books, the one in Rockford. I'd never been to this one before. Because often when I get the bug to do these half-price book trips, I will try to plan a route, kind of a loop that'll take me around 4 or 5 of them. 2, 3, 4, or 5, depending on where I'm going. So there's 2 of them in Madison. There maybe used to be a third. I think, you know what it is? There's a couple of other used book places, or used to be, in Madison. So I would incorporate going to half-price books, the 2 Madison locations, with hitting a couple of game stores and a couple of used bookstores as well. Sort of make a day trip, right? If you're going to drive an hour plus to go in some direction, then when you get there, it's nice to have 6 or 7 things to do instead of just 1 or 2, right? So make a day of it. Get an early start. Plan arrival when the earliest place you can get to at one end or other of the route is opening up. Be their first customer. Head inside, peruse the place. Head around to the next place, next closest. Do a little lunchtime plan. Hit 3 or 4 more in the afternoon, and then drive back before rush hour traffic. Get out while the getting's good. I lived in Chicago for 20 years and in and around Chicago for most of my life, and I've got to say, one of the things I definitely do when I do trips like this is to avoid rush hour traffic. So I don't start so early that I'm getting any of that morning traffic. And most places, retail places, don't open till 10 a.m. these days. In some cases they're not open at all. In some cases noon if they're open. Some days only given days. But, let's talk pre-corona days. 10 a.m. seemed to be a time most retail establishments would open. So you could usually plan, if you're driving an hour, like I would be from here, a little over an hour, you leave here just before 9 or so, you've missed most of the morning traffic, and by the time you get there, one of your half-price books or whatever is open. Get around to the game stores, drop a little money here, a little money there, look for some bargains, pick up some nice stuff, and find a nice place for lunch. Well, what I did on Friday was, after getting a game in with Tom on Yukata, hopped in the car and went down toward Rockford. I went to that half-price books down there. Now, I hadn't been to this one. I'm going to do this circle again. There's 2 in Madison, 3 in Milwaukee. There's about 8 or 9, or has been, around Chicago. So usually I would do the western suburb ones all in one loop, 4 or 5 of them. And I'd do the north suburbs and north end ones all in one loop. So I got like 4 different trips I could take at different times of the year and do little loops of half-price books, but never went out to the one in Rockford, which they call a half-price books warehouse. So I always thought, well, this is going to be just some huge place chock full of. It's basically the same size as any other half-price books. They may even have less on their shelf. Now, that may be because of the current circumstances, so let's take that with a grain of salt. Their shelves were fairly empty. Board games, I check a handful of things when I go to a half-price books. Always check the board games, and in this case, The board game selection was pretty mainstream / family oriented. Trivial Pursuits, types of Monopoly. There weren't a lot of niche or Euro games. Um, there definitely was, Balderdash and categories. Those kind of games that I wouldn't be looking for personally. Um, but a pretty good selection of them, to be fair. I would say they had a whole 2 shelving units devoted to, right, 6 foot high, 4 foot wide, shelving units full of games. So if that's the kind of games you're looking for, it's worth popping in there if you're in the neighborhood. The RPG section, pretty disappointing. 3 shelves worth. And you know what? Not 4 foot wide. They're like 3 foot wide shelves in this place. So even less than you'd imagine from my previous description. Did you hit the Toad Hall books and records while in Rockford? No, I didn't. It was my intention to get in and get out fairly quickly. It was already early mid-afternoon. I wanted to, when I got to the half-price books, if I saw they were packed, I wasn't even going to go in because even though in Illinois, I think masks are a mandatory requirement, there's still people that kind of shrug that off and don't do it. I don't want to be around those people. I don't want to be infected by them with COVID-19. And I don't want to be infected by that mentality either. There's safe and then there's safe, right? I mean, in a ideal world, mentally, we could all take the hit and spend the next 6 months to a year indoors, isolated, on our own, and not go completely nuts, and be able to afford to do that so that we can completely isolate this virus, eradicate it, and move on with the rest of our lives. But obviously, a lot of people don't feel that way. A lot of people want to be able to go out and do things. I get the itch myself. Certainly, I go to the store, grocery store, for essentials. Got to keep the larder full, and there are other things, medicines and whatnot, toiletries that you need to pick up periodically. You can stock heavy on these things and do it less often, and that's a good idea if you can afford to do it that way and you have the space to accommodate stocking, that sort of stuff. But getting out and about sometimes, whether it's picking up some curbside food delivery or whatever, it increases your risk, right? Any extra contact you make with people is going to elevate your risk. It's just how statistics work. So how much of that can you do and feel safe doing? Well, that's everybody's own call. Personally, for this trip, I went down. There were only a few cars in the parking lot. There were 2 employees and 3 people in the store. I donned my mask as soon as I went in. In this case, both employees and all of the customers were wearing masks. Everybody stayed far away from each other. I noted that myself included, people were looking at books without touching too much. Occasionally you got to pull something out to catch a price on these things, but you can do so carefully. And seemed pretty safe. I found a copy of Flashing Swords, ! Number 2. hardcover, one of a series of 5 books that were edited, I think. I should just pull this information up when I'm going to be discussing it, although I wasn't sure I was going to be discussing it at this point. We'll just pop over here. Lynn Carter, right? Yeah, there we go. Is a series of fantasy anthologies published by Dell Books between 1973 and 1981. Under the editorship of Lynn Carter, it showcased the heroic fantasy work of members of the Swordsmen and Sorcerers Guild of America, Saga, a somewhat informal literary group active from the 1960s to the 1980s, of which Carter was the guiding force. Most of the important sword and sorcery writers of the time of the group's founding were members. Later, membership was extended to other fantasy authors. The Flashing Swords series provides and this is all from Wikipedia, by the way. Flashing Swords series provides a cross-section of the heroic fantasy of the period. Carter and Saga also sponsored the Gandalf Award from 74 to 81. With the collapse of Carter's health in the 80s, the anthology series and Gandalf Award, and likely Saga itself, all went into abeyance. A precursor of the series was Swords Against Tomorrow, edited by Robert Hoskins for Signet Books in 1970, an anthology which included pieces by 4 of the 8 Saga members at the time. So there were 5 of these. 73, 1 and 2 came out. 76 came out. Flashing Swords number 3, Warriors and Wizards. Flashing Swords number 4, Barbarians and Black Magicians. Flashing Swords number 5, Demons and Daggers, came out in 81. So it was 2 in 73, 76, 77, and then finally in 81. In all, 23 stories were published in the series, all of them for the first time, which is kind of nice. If you're a fan of the genre and you want the original version of certain stories that appeared later in authors' personal anthologies and short story books, then some of these are to be had that way. And these are not particularly rare or expensive. I picked up a volume, Flashing Swords number 2, hardcover, pretty clean. Had the cello wrap on the outside of the dust jacket, much like libraries will do, although it was not a library copy. And it was $7. And, if you go on eBay or Amazon, you'll see the lower end ones, price-wise, regardless of condition, go for $6, $7, $8. So not expensive to collect these from the 70s, right? In all, 23 stories were published in the series, all of them for the first time. These included 2 Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser stories by Fritz Leiber in number 1 and 3, 2 Dying Earth stories by Jack Vance in number 1 and number 4, the first 2 parts of the novel The Merman's Children by Poul Anderson, number 1 and number 4, 2 Almeric the Man God stories by Lynn Carter in 1 and 3, Pusad Tale in the first part of the novel The Incorporated Knight by L. Sprague de Camp in 2 and 3 respectively, 2 Elric of Mnemosyne stories by Michael Moorcock in number 2 and number 4, 2 Witchworld stories by Andre Norton in number 2 and number 3, 2 Brack the Barbarian stories. Did I lose my... No, okay. I'm still on. I wonder, was I out for a while? You tell me, Lexfire, if you're still around, if I went dead for a little while. Looks like I'm all right. John Jakes did the 2 Brack the Barbarian stories in 2 and 4. There was a story by Avram Davidson, a Catherine Kerr story, Roger Zelazny story. There are more. Oh, Craig Shaw Gardner, Tanith Lee. So, There are just a ton of wonderful stories that the first time they saw print were in this series. So, like I say, if you're a collector, that's the way to go. I Speaking of encumbrance, boy, I really went off on a tangent today with these things. Speaking of encumbrance, though, it is fair to say, pardon me one second, fair to say that I became more encumbered on this trip. I love Australia. Not just for picking up the book, but because I went by the machine shed, which is not far from that half price books. And you know, if you're going to make a trip to Rockford and you like family style dining alone, go by the machine shed and get the 18-ounce, only Thursday through Sunday, and only oven roasted, unless you go on Saturday when they have it smoked, prime rib dinner. They have a 10-ounce, a 14-ounce, and an 18-ounce, which they call the Hoss. And, you know, if you're going to get the 10, you might as well get the 14. And what the heck, if you're getting the 14, get the 18. Baked potato, vegetable. They've got these baked apple. It's almost like chunky style applesauce, which is delicious. Fantastic place to fresh dinner rolls. Little pricey, not pricey for what it is. But you know, you get good food like this, you're going to pay some bucks. You can drop $30 in the place getting a big old fancy meal like that anyway. But it's well worth it. They have specials on different days and stuff. I think Wednesday, maybe it was Tuesday, they used to do like a fried chicken night. I remember what they used to have for breakfast was they had a rule. If you finished a breakfast and you were still hungry, they would just bring you some more eggs. And I feel kind of like Ron Swanson being so gleeful about this. But they didn't want you leaving there hungry. And only in the northern Midwest, right, would we overeat in this manner and consider it a right and entitlement. And so I do. But it's absolutely delicious food at the machine shed. Another nice thing about the machine shed is the huge kitchen, huge dining room. I get there about 4 o'clock. And again, this is one of those situations where I was heading out of town after the half price books. I swung in there with the intention I'm either going to eat there or I'm going to get something to go. Or if it's too crowded and I see a bunch of people not wearing masks, I won't get out of the car. I'll just drive through the parking lot and head back out. So I popped in, pretty empty, 4 o'clock afternoon, Friday. You know, they got this huge dining room. You go through a gift shop to get into the whole place. It's a John Deere, if you're not familiar, John Deere themed restaurant. So it's dedicated to the American farmer. And there were only 2 or 3 tables occupied in the place when I got there. So everybody was well separated from each other. Everybody on staff wearing masks. They have a notification up by the door about how they don't recycle the air within the place because their air conditioning is all over the place and it all gets sucked out by the big fans in the kitchen, which are just expelling hot air out of the kitchen constantly, especially during the summer, obviously. In any event, if you can tell that if you sit in certain places, you're going to be at the upper end of the stream where you're getting immediate air conditioning and nothing's flowing past you from other areas of the restaurant, which is the big concern, is airflow if you're in an enclosed place. Obviously, if you're sitting around a table with a bunch of other people in close proximity, that's trouble. There's no way to avoid certain interchanges there. But if you're sitting by yourself at one end of a restaurant below an air conditioning vent, then stuff's flowing past you and has not flowed past anybody else. So hopefully you're minimizing. You're still potentially touching surfaces. You got to be careful about that. Anyway, great meal, great food. Over tip if you go there. People are hurting these days. They're not seeing as many customers. Servers in particular are not making much money when they can get shifts. They could use all the help they can get. If you want to spread some of that stimulus money around in the way in which it was best meant to be helping the economy, push it toward people like this who have been hurting for 4 months, and make sure you do your part. In any event, shall we continue to talk about encumbrance? Have I pontificated enough about that? Those were the 2 stops in Rockford, and then I came back home. Feel okay right now. It's only been a couple of days. If next weekend you're seeing me cancel shows, you'll know I probably shouldn't have gone out and done that. All right, looking at the bottom over here. Is my cursor visible when I'm on top of this thing? Do I have to click on it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Beautiful. It's just what we want. Weight and equivalence, 1 coin. That's where we left off. A coin is a coin. It's not a matter of its weight. It's also a matter of its mass, the amount of space it takes up as well. And that all feeds into encumbrance. Small sack holds 50. A large sack or backpack holds 300. A scroll or piece of jewelry, encumbrance of 20. A potion or wine skin, 30. Those don't seem equivalent, do they? But they are what they are. Flagon or chalice, 50. I guess because it's metal, it's heavy, plus it's got some odd shape to it. A wand with a case, much like what I was holding up before, 100. Staff with a case, 300. Now see, it says this here, and I haven't looked at this for some time, or this part of this for some time. First book of the original 3 booklets, right? Why do we have a case with a staff? I would not imagine you would need a case. A staff doesn't need to come. Is that like, I mean, wand, rod, and staff are size roughly a foot-ish, maybe a little more, a little less for a wand. A rod I've always pictured as being 2 to 3 feet. But a staff, I always think of a staff as, 5 to 6 to 7 feet in length, sometimes smooth like a quarterstaff, sometimes gnarly like Gandalf's magic staff. If it was magical, I assume it was, right? But a staff with a case. Okay, that's just kind of weird. In any event, this is part of the review process of this early work. A gem, just 1 unit as well. So just like a coin, 1 gem, 1 coin, 1 unit of encumbrance. Gets into experience next. We won't go there. That 1 page, as my friend Mark might say over on progrock.com, was chock-a-block, full of information. And don't say that about getting sick. Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that right away, Alex Fire. You're right, I shouldn't tempt fate by invoking the COVID-19. Not even in jest. Ooh, don't say ingest, because that's how you get it, by ingesting things. Anyway, pretty cool. All that information just in the original, right? I think we can also have a look at something else I should try to pull up here. Let's see. I wonder if it's worth... Well, you know what? Without getting directly into first edition, since we're down on time anyway, let's say this. There's a couple of... there's a recent article on the Xenopus archives about let's go back to this. Here we go. Xenopus archives, exploring the underworld of Holmes Basics. This is Zach's place, right? He does this Encumbrance, a dagger in the boot, Gygax's location-based encumbrance of the 1970s. So, location-based encumbrance in lost caverns of Solchkonf. You know, I've never said that right. I think it's spelled like 5 different ways in the various sources, but I'm just saying that because items carried, special location carried. So this was the start of that, right? And this article from last Friday goes into that. Definitely go there. Read this article. Very interesting things in here. One in the girdle, other in the boot on his 2 daggers. I won't read it out. I'll make you go and read it yourself. Items carried. Oh, yes. And then 77 D&D character sheets started having items and locations for them. Notice you need less room for the item than the location, because I may want to say that it's in my saddlebag in a secret pouch underneath the horn of the saddle or something crazy. So you detail all that stuff in AD&D, Player's Handbooks in 78. Slow to elaborate on encumbrance. The Player's Handbook 78 contains weights for weapons, but nothing else. So true, which is why we really don't need to look at that. It's not important for us to critique the decisions about what each weapon was designated as weighing or units of encumbrance, but it's worth noting that those are the only things mentioned in the player's handbook. And you'd think it's the players that would need to have that information, right? Dungeon Master's Guide, first published in August of 79. The further rules for encumbrance were limited to types of armor in the section Types of Armor and Encumbrance. For more on this, you can read another article on this website called Gygaxian Armor. Everything on this site is worth reading. Go down the rabbit hole when you get the chance. Absolutely read as much of it as you can find the time to read, because it's all good. It's all good. Let's see where we're at here. Can we do this? No, that's not the place for it. I guess we could do this, and then we could do this. Here I am. Okay. So there we go. Let me just do that. Make it a little bigger. Talk about it a little more. Does it give us plenty of room? There we go. So we did that. Gygaxian Armor, another article. Boom, boom. He's got some good links off to the side, too. In addition, the accompanying text provides an example describing how two adventurers, Dimwall and Drudge, carry their equipment in a manner similar, except that it is written out descriptively rather than a list. Yeah. So it's like a chunk out of the things they carried, right? Classic short story, The Things They Carried. If you ever get a chance to read that, let me just double check the author here. Yes, Tim O'Brien. Ever get a chance to read this? It's a strange bit of narration because it is the experience of some soldiers on the ground in Vietnam, but it's seen through the eyes of the things they carried. So you'll see what I mean when you read it. It's a very unusually written short story, but it's well worth reading. Character record sheets became a little more complex regarding all the stuff we talked about: left side, center side, right side, item, location, and weight. And then we could put all that stuff together and add it all up. Go there, read the articles, make some comments, keep the conversation going. Always interesting to be part of that. I shared this in the OK Grognard Facebook group, the OK Grognard Show Facebook group, and asked people their general thoughts on Encumbrance. And let me just report some of that here, since we're on the subject. Corey says, kind of wing it based on common sense. Oh, and here's how I phrased it. Encumbrance, use it or lose it. To the letter or shorthanded. Kind of wanted it wide open for people to share their information based on what they actually do. Boots on the ground again, right? The Simon said, keep an eye on it, especially physical bulk of some finds, right? Doesn't matter how much a piano weighs. If you can't fit it through a doorway, how to get in there in the first place? That's the question. Was it manufactured in there? Anyway, John Enfield says, I ignore it in my game. It's a fantasy after all. Fair enough. Tim Samwise, 7, Harper. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Right? Is it convenient? Is it going to screw up your game or slow it down or take away from the fun? Maybe there's times when ignoring it is just the best way forward. You should check out Tim's YouTube channel, by the way. Always a treat. Kurt says, I tend to use it more with new campaigns and or new players, kind of to show the new players this is a thing, a consideration. Then as they approach 9th level or so with henchmen, hirelings, wagon trains, etc., we only talk about it with the big stuff. The exception to the above is when you fall into a body of water. So true. If you're going to be drowning, well, you're going to be drowning with all of your goods, right? That's how that goes. And what else? Let's see. We've got Joshua Burnett. From my own experience, oh, well, Samwise again says, I think I like it better when I'm a player. Interesting. Joshua Burnett says, from my own experience, we use it for about 3 sessions and then forget about it for the rest of the campaign. Right? It's important early on to kind of set the right tone. I'm going to skip down to a couple of these and come back to this. I was just making a character, the Sword of Cepheus, Samwise again, fantasy version of Traveler, and that only tracks large major items. I rather like that. Okay. Suzanne Anderson, an important voice in the OSR, in my opinion. It's important, she says, slots or large item tracking is pretty effective without too much fiddling. Do yourself a favor. Get a chance. Friend her, follow the stuff she writes. Interesting stuff. So too Marty Walzer. He has that Raging Owlbear blog that is well worth reading. He's written about Encumbrance a couple of times over the year. I worked on a bag slot hybrid, but I never quite got it close enough for what I thought worked. And then, that's, although his first one, the original post, was this one here. I asked him for a little more information about what he thought, because one of his two posts came in 2016, and then the next one was followed up with in 2018. And that was interesting. There were 2 years in between, and it's been 2 years since that. But let's start with this one. Oops. I love that. That's my epic fail screen. Experiencing technical difficulty, please stand by. I found this image and I thought it just so fitting for this type of thing, because this fellow here has both fallen on his ass and fallen off his ass. And I love the fact that there's a pun. So there you go. In any event, what I really want to do is continue looking at this right here. All right. So the 2016 one, he writes in regard to some posts that he saw. And remember, we're at this point a year and a half, March of 2016. So August of 2014, 2015. We're a year and a half since the release of the 5th edition starter set. Okay. About a year since the books actually were released in the fall. The starter set came out earlier in 2014, July 4th. So, this naturally is going to take on a interest in 5th edition as people are still exploring it and deciding what's good about it, what's bad, what do we want to keep. And piggybacking off a couple of Facebook posts and a blog post he saw about different ways of handling encumbrance. Red Barn, good morning. Thanks for popping in. Do we have to stand now? And do we have to stand now? I'm not sure I understand the comments. Something. I don't know. Did I start singing the national anthem or something while I wasn't paying attention? Please stand by. Ah! Good one. Yeah. Yeah, I just have to get off my ass and stand, right? Work off some of those machine shed pounds. The stuff he gets into about is based off of 5th edition stuff that you've been reading, based off of Facebook posts, based off of a blog. So there's this, he kind of gives us where his mind wandered from to get to the point where he starts writing about this. Updated sheet got his attention. He talks about this a little bit. Then a happy medium for D&D 5e, kind of an idea he threw together. His modification adds a little more flexibility for groups who don't want to do hardcore resource management. That's not a bad thing. He's got a PDF download for it right there. Not completely happy enough with it anyway, a couple years later. And I say that knowing full well that in the earlier one, it's really a 5th edition thing he's putting together. This is more of an OSR thing because BX5 homebrew rules. So essentially, he's got a kind of a BX offshoot game he's running. And so this is now an OSR encumbrance musing in 2018. Just about 2 years ago, in May of 2018. Encumbrance is a bit of a pain in the rear. Has always been a tug-of-war between players and DMs, which is why most DMs hand-wave it. Players rarely track their weight, and PCs end up carrying all kinds of ridiculous equipment that apparently takes a single object interaction to get out of who knows which hole on the PC's body. Yeah, funny stuff from Marty there. Because who knows where those gems are stashed? Did you swallow them? Best case scenario. It's a good article. It's exploratory. He talks about this kind of placement. There was a sheet that I actually did back in the day for a 3rd edition game, which basically took Da Vinci's Man and used that as a centerpiece and did slots off of it. So it was basically like this. There was a 3rd edition idea that you could have 2 rings, a weapon in this hand, a weapon in that hand, one torso thing, one this thing, one cloak, one helm, one... and these things would only function if you piled on, if you put 3 helmets on your head somehow, you would not be able to get the benefit of 3 helmets, because that would be just ridiculous. In any event, he's not completely satisfied with this, although this is very much, like I say, very much like what was being done in 3rd edition, with there being equipment slots. The idea was you can never go too far wrong if you limit the number of things people carry. And to that end, one of the thoughts I had was that you didn't really need to do too much in the way of that kind of limitation. If you just say, look, just a kind of a short form, simple way of dealing with it, you can carry 25 things. Or you can carry 10 things plus a number of things equal to your strength. So if your strength is 15, you can carry 25 things. 16, you can carry 26 things. At least you're putting the players in a position to think about this. Give it some thought. They may argue, what do you mean 25 gold pieces? No, you know what? Let's call 25 gold pieces one thing. Much like in what we were looking at with the original edition stuff, where it was just a straight up 80 units of encumbrance for miscellaneous equipment, rope, spikes, so on, and torches, whatever, etc. In that way, you're always going to have people that are going to try to game the system and try to waste a lot of your time. And, penalize them. Penalize them for it. Somebody's going to be asking 1,000 questions. Well, some people's brains work like that. And quite frankly, they're going to keep asking questions, and you may have to codify things a little more. But maybe you'll get away with a short form of it. Maybe you'll say, you know what, estimate, use your common sense to the player. And when they're done, you'll look it over and say, yeah, this looks fine. And then, of course, they'll immediately say, what if I had a 2-handed sword? Would that still be fine? Yeah. Well, you can say no. In any event, that's where we are. That's my little idea for a simple one. There are some places you can go and read some additional stuff. And I will say, since we're coming up on an hour, that we are working into the week tomorrow, weekly news and the giveaway announcement. We've got cartography and world building on Tuesday, campaign discussion on Wednesday, mostly surrounding Grimwald, my home campaign setting. We've got terrain crafting and miniatures painting talk on Thursday, Friday's building adventures with an eye toward Virtual Tabletop Adventures, back for episode 7 of Conan the Adventurer animated series from 1992. Rules Retrospective here next week. I want to thank everybody who's made it by today and popped into the chat. Lexfire, Red Barn, thank you very much. And whoever else has been lurking. If you're catching... be sure to follow the channel and pipe in on the stream chat. It gets you added in automatically for a weekly giveaway I do. If you're on YouTube, then by all means, subscribe to the channel. Do me a favor, give us a thumbs up, maybe make a comment. Help make us a little better. I'd appreciate it. And everybody, have a great, safe day. Thanks very much, Lexfire. Thank you, Red Barn. See y'all soon. Bye-bye.